Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from RotoWire here with the Week 12 Thanksgiving Day bonanza, fiasco, everything we've got here. We're going to break these three games down. We're going to try to set you up for when you're setting your fantasy lineups, when you're doing DFS, if you're sports betting, try to break these games down and get you all set up for success. If there are questions at any point, if they're directly related to what I'm talking about, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I'll wait till the end and we'll see how this goes. Let's start out with the Bills at the Lions. So the first thing is road game, obviously, for the Bills, but the Bills played last Sunday in Detroit because of the snowstorm in Buffalo. So they had to reroute and they played there. So they didn't have a travel situation. So that's good. And they just played there. So there's something to be said for that. Regardless, it's an odd opportunity for them. But again, taking the travel out, they were probably able to really focus on their game plan. Whereas if they were back at home and traveling, they wouldn't have probably traveled out till Tuesday or Wednesday. And it would have been, so this week is probably way more focused than usual for them. So I think we need to consider that. When we're looking at key injuries in this game, so the cornerback, the only good cornerback, no offense to the Lions cornerbacks, is Jeff Okudah is doubtful with a concussion. And also on the offensive side of the ball, DJ Chark played very limited snaps last week, and now it's a short week. I don't know if they plan on ramping him up, but he's still doing limited practices. So my guess is he's in for a very limited role again. Again, I can't prove that one way or the other. And Josh Reynolds has missed multiple games with a back injury. He's been practicing, but he's still questionable. Don't know what his status will be because he has practiced and has not played. On the Bills side, there are three significant injuries. Two of their pass rushers in the rotation, Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa, they are Rousseau's been declared out. Epinesa is doubtful, so he's not playing. That's a big deal. And also the middle linebacker, Tremaine Edmonds, will be out as well. So that's three foundational pieces of the defense that are out for Buffalo. That could be helpful if there's garbage time in this game a little bit later. So let's start with the Bills on offense. First, I'll kind of go over the overall game plan and how I see it. And then from there, we'll go into individual players because, again, you've got to set lineups. You got to play DFS. You want prop bets, all these good things. So first of all, Detroit doesn't get pressure on the quarterback. I know they had Aiden Hutchinson, but PFS has their Happy Thanksgiving has their pressure rate as a bottom 3 unit. And their pass coverage, it is the worst in the league. And now we don't have Jeff Okudah, who is their best corner. So that is very, very problematic for them. Now, the Bills' offensive line, they're middling in pass protection, but it shouldn't matter here. We're not going to see a consistent pass rush. Now, you can also run on the Lions. They're a bottom 8 run defense, but the Bills' DNA is that if they don't have to run, they won't. I think if they need to establish it in certain games, they decide to make that as part of the element. But I think when they're game planning here and knowing Okudah is concussed and he's not playing, I think they really have an opportunity to attack here. Now, so when we're talking about Detroit as to what they're going to be able to do, I don't think there's any, they're obviously not playing the run because you don't have to worry about that. But I don't know that they have extra bodies to commit to the pass because they are just so decimated there. And it's not like they're going to be able to challenge Josh Allen. And I'll get into it later, but they're very bad against mobile quarterbacks. Oh, not good for a Josh Allen game, right? So we look at this now. Now, the Bills' offense has been very erratic lately, but overall they've been successful. They're winning games, right? I do see this as a get-right spot for the Bills' passing game. Now, Josh Allen, people ask about the elbow. He's had 2 very low yardage games, right? But he had a big one in the middle of that. So to me, when I'm watching him, I don't see it right now as the elbow is a limiting factor. I'm not a doctor, right? But when he had the big game there, it shows me, well, he still could do that. So I think that this is fine. I think we treat him as we normally would, right? Josh Allen has had some struggles from a consistency standpoint, even back to last year, but his greatness masks it. He does so many things right that when he throws the interceptions, he had like a 3-game streak with two interceptions in each. Anyway, so get back to the game plan. I do think the Bills get out to a significant lead here, and then they could run the ball later in the game, but that is going to lend the question. If they get a big lead in the second half, is it more about James Cook than Devin Singletary if there's garbage time. And I think that might be affirmative. All right, let's get to the individual players on the Bills side of the offense now, as I broke down what I think the game plan, the approach would be. So, like I said, Detroit, they played a lot of mobile quarterbacks. Hurts went for 90 and a touchdown. Geno Smith, 49 and a touchdown. Even Aaron Rodgers, who's not mobile anymore, went for 40. Justin Fields, 147 and 2 tutties. And Daniel Jones ran for 50 and a score. So, I mean, to think that Josh Allen is not going to exploit that here is limited thinking. He's going to run the ball. He's going to have great success on the ground. Now, they may not have to have him do it, but if he sees these huge gaps, which obviously Detroit is leaving gaps in their run defense for quarterbacks as they're dropping their zone back too far, and it just presents itself. And when you drop those zone back, sometimes that, the receivers aren't quickly open, so he'll run. So I think to say that Josh Allen's going to run for 60 yards here and possibly a score, I think that's really positive. Now, quarterbacks who've thrown for over 290 yards against Detroit have been Aaron Rodgers, Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, and Carson Wentz. So we have a good number of quarterbacks in that 300-yard range against them. So Josh Allen, now, when we talk about his props, and if you're betting him, and you're playing him in every season-long lineup because he's Josh Allen. He has at least 86 rush yards in 2 of his last 3 games. But remember, I mentioned earlier, he's had some struggles through the air. In 2 of his last 3 games, his passing yard has been at 205 or less. But like I said, he had that 300-plus yard game in there. So again, I don't think it's injury related. And he only has 2 total touchdown passes over his last 3 games. So the touchdown passes have not been coming there. So I do think that, like I mentioned this matchup earlier, and because of no pass rush, because of Jeff Okudah being out and they can't cover anyway, I think Allen goes for 330 yards here. And I think he gets a large majority of that in the first half. I think he rushes for 65 yards, and I think he gets a total of 4 touchdowns here. I think he's throwing for 3 and running for 1. It's going to be a big Josh Allen day. I think the Bills want to make a statement on the national stage. I think right now they're feeling a little vulnerable, and I think they want to put that stamp out there for everybody to know that they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Now, next, so the running game, talked about that earlier. So Detroit was gashed earlier in the year. The big running numbers against them came earlier in the year. But what they did was, now they can't do it in this game, but when they played the Giants, when they played the Bears and the Packers, they basically said, we're going to stop the running game, and we don't think the passing games are worth respecting. And so they were successful. They held Saquon Barkley, 15 carries, 22 yards. And Bears, their running backs, 19 carries, 94 yards. A little success there. Aaron Jones, 9 for 25. But in this case, obviously, with Josh Allen, well, you can't sell out at all to stop the run. Now, Devin Singletary has been 50 or fewer total yards in 2 of his last 3 games, but he scored 3 times. And in those 3 games, listen to his totals. He has 46 touches for 192 yards. So that's not bad. It's a good 4.5, maybe 4.5 yards a touch, which isn't bad, but that includes the receiving game. Now, James Cook on just half of the touches, 22, he has 141 yards. He's like 6.5 yards per touch. He's been playing really well, and he's getting more work lately. Now, I do think because of the ease of the matchup, and I do think that obviously if Detroit can do anything, especially with Okudah out, they've got to put as many bodies back in the secondary as they can. So I do think Singletary gets to 65 yards here. And I think James Cook gets to 55, again, with a lot of that maybe being garbage time, it's possible. But I do think they're going to have enough opportunity to run with a lead. They're not just going to sit back and throw the ball 50 times. They're going to have great success, but they'll be able to run enough. And I think that's just going to pile up. And so now the receivers are next. So Detroit this year, they've primarily been killed by alpha receivers, but I know Justin Jefferson laid an egg on them in week 2, week 3, something like that. But the higher end receivers have been very productive. And Gabe Davis, started with him. He's seen a little uptick in targets lately. His last 2 games, he's like 9 and a 7. And his last 2 games, the yardage total again, not through the roof, but he got like a 68 and a 93. So he's getting some yardage there. Now, Stephon Diggs, sure, he took care of it for fantasy. He got a touchdown, but 4 for 48 against Cleveland. But in his other 2 previous games, he's averaging 8.5 catches for 106 yards. So the game against Cleveland, not worried about that at all. It was a weird game, right? Now, Isaiah McKenzie, on the other hand, he has 2 of his last 3 games, 12 yards or less. He has a 37 mix in there. He really hasn't been a factor. I think McKenzie, they need him in games where they're facing a very strong defense, but one where they know that that defense can maybe put a little damper on the receivers, and McKenzie underneath becomes an option. They don't need to get gadgety here, and I don't think they're going to get gadgety. I think McKenzie does not need to be part of this game plan. I think this one is about Josh Allen getting the ball downfield a little more than usual. So I think both of these receivers are blowing up in the spot. I think Davis, though, Davis gets a 2-touchdown game here. I think he gets 115 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he could go beyond that. I think Stephon Diggs gets 140 yards. He always could score a touchdown. So you put him in the mix for that. But I just think this is a Davis game. I think Davis is going to be the touchdown guy here. With the matchups being so easy, Allen's just going to have this nice single coverage. Diggs isn't going to have to do anything special, but I think there's one of those where Allen can just throw it up to Davis. Let's just go after it and attack. And it's a different type of throw. And so I think that's where we're going. But Diggs is going to have his big game too. The tight end, Dawson Knox is the player at tight end, and Detroit's given up 7 touchdowns to tight end. Now, they've had a couple of games. Fant and Disley both scored for Seattle. Komet scored twice against them. Mike Gesicki, Logan Thomas scored, but they give it up. Now, in the last 2 games, Dawson Knox has been seeing more targets. Just 13 total targets. He's caught 11 of them for $127. Hasn't gotten in the end zone. But I think with Detroit being so bad in the red zone against tight ends, I do think Knox scores this game. I think he gets 45 yards. It would be more. I would like to say more on that, but I'm not going over 45 yards because, again, I think this is a wide receiver-centric game for them. All right, now the other side of the ball, let's go to the Lions side here. So the Lions on offense. So the Detroit offensive line, we talked a lot about this in the offseason. We talked about how this could be an elite line. They've been very good at run blocking. The pass pro has not been good. Per PFF, they're a bottom 5 or 6 blocking unit. And so that is not good. So very problematic there. Now, I want to remind you of the injuries too. When the Lions are on offense, they're facing a Bills defense. 2 of their edge rushers, Greg Rousseau's out, AJ Epinesa is doubtful, and then the middle linebacker, Tremaine Edmonds, is out as well. So that actually helps the Lions offense. So I do think that the Lions, look, Dan Campbell, right? He will do everything he can early to try and run the ball. Buffalo, that is their weakness, right? You want to run on them. As long as the game stays close, which may not be long, they're going to run the ball. And ultimately, though, Buffalo, it's going to be interesting how they want to come out here because they may decide Jared Goff can't beat us. And they primarily play nickel. They put an extra defensive back on the field. And they may not change their colors for this game. But they might. They might say there's no way Goff's beating us. And they might decide to go with more of a base defense. It would be against their pattern, but I don't know how you game plan it otherwise. And so I think they would really like to see Goff have to throw a little bit early. And I think that would be useful for them. So again, I think they try to run, but I think that ends up not being something that pans out for long. So I'm very concerned about that. Now, Goff, we'll talk about him in a minute. Let's talk about him now. So the Bills, now we think about the Bills and we think about great defense. The Bills have had a slew of injuries, and that wasn't the injuries for this game where we have Epinesa out and we have Rousseau out and we have middle linebacker Edmonds out, but they have been beat up at safety. Micah Hyde's been done for the year for many, many weeks. They've had cornerback injuries. They've had a lot of shuffling in the defense backup. Well, they've given up at least 324 passing yards to 4 of the last 6 quarterbacks they faced, and that includes Jacoby Brissett, Kirk Cousins, of course, Patrick Mahomes, and Kenny Pickett. So they have given up big yards. Now, they lead in a lot of these games, and the teams have to throw late, but they are piling up the yardage, and that's important. Now, Jared Goff, though, he's only averaging like 179 yards and a touchdown over his last 3, but is that much different than Kenny Pickett? Well, Brissett was better than that, but the point is this. I think Jared Goff has a moderate passing game here because of the lack of the 2 pass rush weapons being down. I think he goes for about 245 here. I think there's upside for a little bit more, but 245 I think is a pretty fair number for him to go for here. And I think he throws a touchdown, but I still think that it's not going to be a big game because Buffalo plays a really smart zone, and I know they're down people, but I think when they get in the red zone, they're going to make it real difficult for Goff to really have a lot of success there. And now we talk about the running game. So Buffalo recently, if they've been gashed, Dalvin Cook, 14 for $119, Aaron Jones, 20 for $143, but only Dalvin Cook has more than 14 carries against them. And that's because of game script, right? Because Buffalo gets out to leads. And when that happens, teams have to abandon the run game. So that's the rub with Jamal Williams. Now, Buffalo as a pass defense against running backs, they only give 30 yards a game. They've been very stout against them. Matt Milano is playing. Matt Milano is key in coverage, be it tight ends, be it running backs. It's very good. Edmonds a middle linebacker. He could factor in that a little bit, but usually it's more the outside guys that factor in that a bit more. Now, Jamal Williams, in his last 3 games, he's averaging 19 carries. Now, he hasn't got a single target in the last 3 games. And normally we think of Jamal Williams as a good receiving back, but they haven't used him that way. He's like a straight runner. He scored 4 touchdowns in those games, I believe 3 in 1 contest. Now, DeAndre Swift is problematic because in his last 3 games, 13 carries, 10 targets. He's playing like 30% of the snaps. 4 weeks ago, he had a 50% snap share, but then he went down like maybe 15, then 30 and 30. So he is just not seeing the field. So to trust him in fantasy and DFS, it's very dicey because if they're managing his reps because of concerns about health and they're on a short week, that makes it difficult for me to see that happening. So now that said, if they're trailing, again, the Bills are very good against receiving backs, and they constantly play with game script that allows that to happen. So I don't know that much is going on in the passing game. Can Swift break a long play? He's a superstar. Yes. He could get 4 touches, get you 90 yards and a touchdown. That could happen. I'm giving Swift 45 combined yards here, and I think I'm being a slight bit generous here. I think it's more like, 22, I'll say 25 through the air and 20 on the ground, and I think that's about it. And Jamal Williams, I think it's 55 yards. This is not a big game for Jamal Williams. He's had a floor this year, and he's going to reach that floor. I don't think he scored a touchdown here. I don't think they're going to get the ball in the end zone, in the red zone that much. It's not going to be easy for them. Now, the receivers. The types of receivers that have really lit it up against Buffalo, Amari Cooper, Justin Jefferson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, Cooper Kupp. The marginal receivers have done very little against Buffalo. Again, they're a very disciplined zone. Even with the injuries, they communicate very well. The alphas and the guys who are peppered with targets can win because either their quarterback, like in the Juju game, well, you got Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball, and the other ones, you have receivers that could just win, right? So let's talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown here. In his last few games, he's pretty much like 11 yards a target, a reception. He's not the big play guy he was at the end of last year and at the very beginning of this year. He has a 10 for $119. He got a 7 for 76 and a 4 for 55. So it's right there, 10, 11 yards a catch. His targets have been 8 to 11. So he has that solid base floor here. I think he goes 7 for 85 here. I'm going to say 7 catches, 85, and a chance to score. He has a chance to get in the end zone here, a strong chance. And if I'm doing like a touchdown dance on Monkey Knife Fight, I think he's a player I'm strongly considering because he can get open in that short area, and that works out really well. I think, again, with DJ Chark only playing a few snaps last week, hard to project him playing a lot more. Josh Reynolds having missed a few games at the back. I think Khalif Raymond surprised with 60 yards, and a lot of those come later in the game when it's maybe a bit out of question. As where the other yards are coming from, that's really difficult. Like Detroit will get some marginal players involved, and that will happen. But I think those are the 2 primary guys you're looking at for fantasy. But Raymond has been between 17 and 47 yards in his last 3, so getting a 60 would be over that range. But again, I think due to the game script, I think that kind of works. And now tight ends, well, the only tight end to put over 45 yards against Buffalo all year is Kelsey. They haven't allowed a touchdown, and James Mitchell and Brock Wright play minor roles. So obviously not even in tight end premium am I advocating in any of them. I had to take Brock Wright in the RotoWire Thanksgiving draft because I was the last tight end left on the board, and it is what it was. But again, either of them could pop up for a short touchdown, but I'm not expecting any volume otherwise. So overall for this game, here's my prediction. Bills are not a good team to fall behind on when you have a limited quarterback and limited passing game weapons, which they do. Amon-Ra St. Brown is great, but everybody else is kind of limited. The Detroit D, I don't think they're going to have an opportunity to slow down the Buffalo passing attack. I think this one could get out of hand quickly. I do think the Lions scored a late touchdown to make this a little closer, but I'm going to say Bills 34, Lions 20. And it's as I do this number now, the Bills right now on DraftKings, as I record, are 9.5-point favorites. So that puts me on the Bills side with about 5 points to spare. So I like that. Now the over and under is exactly 54, and I'm projecting 54 points. So that puts me as a pass on that. If you're forced to bet it, I'm probably going with the under on it. But again, I have it projected exactly what Vegas has it projected at. So I'm going to lay off that game myself. I'll tease it. I'll do a 3-game teaser. But that would be about it and get some points free that way. All right, let's go to the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. So remember, these teams played early in the season back in week 3, but Cooper Rush was the quarterback. Dallas wins that game. We'll talk about that. Now, injuries in this game, mostly on the Giants side of the ball. Daniel Bellinger still isn't back from the eye injury. He's ruled out for that one, so we won't get him. Now, they probably all play, but 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen for the Giants are out in this game. Also, the Giants are hurting a cornerback. We know Aaron Robbins has been on the injured reserve for a little while, but Adoree Jackson's on the out list as well. So they're missing 2 top corners here, and that is not good. Now, in terms of these teams defensively, they both are weaker against the run. They're bottom half units, and the Cowboys are really like bottom quarter. They're bad, and the Giants struggle to cover. They're like per PFF, they're number 31 in coverage, and again, they're without Jackson and Robinson. So this is a team you really could pick on through the air. And in terms of pressure rate, the Giants, you always think of Giants in great pressure, but they're bottom 11 in pressure rate, so that's not good. And of course, we know at Dallas. I won't spend too much time on this, but the reason Green Bay came back late, I don't know if you guys catch my shows or not, but Green Bay made that comeback. Micah Parsons was moved into the Anthony Barr role, who was out. He only rushed 11 times in that game. And then Anthony Brown, the cornerback, was concussed and left the game. And they already had been without their slot corner, Jordan Lewis. So basically, Green Bay hit a perfect storm. Micah Parsons wasn't rushing, and they didn't have 2 corners on the field. And guess what? Christian Watson's a superstar, right? And so that's kind of what happened there. But Dallas against Minnesota, they didn't make that mistake of Micah Parsons. Barr did miss that game, but they put Micah Parsons in the usual, and Anthony Brown was healthy, and they came out and they did the damage that the Dallas Cowboys defense can do. All right, let's break this down with the Giants side of the ball. So first of all, the Giants have had a really diverse running attack. I really give Coach Brian Daboll a lot of credit. They've used great personnel groupings, multiple tight ends, sometimes 3 tight ends, multiple running backs, and they have found a way to create a math numbers advantage in the running game, and they've deployed Daniel Jones as a running weapon, designed runs frequently, and they compromise defenses by putting the run game first. Now, we've seen Barkley, and I'm going to talk about him in a little bit. We've seen that running game get figured out a little bit recently, and I'll explain that when I get to the individual positions. But look, when in this game, as we're scripting this out, if the Giants are in obvious passing situations, they are in extreme trouble here because of that Dallas pass rush. And, Trevon Diggs is going to be a factor in this game too. But, the Anthony Brown at corner, there's going to be a very difficult spot for them if they have to throw the ball. Now, the Giants have been average in pass protection. That's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough against Dallas. And Wan'Dale Robinson, don't forget, he injured his ACL. He's done for the season. Not that he had done a ton of damage consistently. He only been around a few weeks, but he was probably their best weapon. And I know Slayton's playing well. We'll talk about him in a bit. I get that. But without Wan'Dale Robinson, that's one less player for Dallas to worry about, right? And anyway, Dallas's coverage, top 6. Same deal with the Buffalo-Detroit game. If you fall behind Dallas, that is a very bad recipe because when you can rush the passer and you can cover, a lot of bad things can happen fast. And we got to be careful with Barkley. As a runner, he could be game scripted out, but the good news is we know he can catch the ball, and he's an excellent receiver. So Barkley should maintain very good fantasy value here in that scenario. Now, I think Dallas comes in this game plan-wise. I do think they're going to say, you know what? We can put an extra body in the box. We need to slow down Saquon Barkley. If we slow him down, we're not scared of Daniel Jones. We're not scared of Darius Slayton and the other plethora of receivers they have who mix in now that Wan'Dale Robinson's out. So that's important. All right, so let's get to the individual players. Start with the Giants side, right? So first, Dallas, they stifle the opposing quarterbacks. Now, back when they played the Rams a few weeks ago, Stafford had a couple of quirky long throws. Was Tutu Atwell one of them, maybe? He had a big yardage game that came out of nowhere. I think Dallas took them lightly. They didn't even think they could throw, right? But nobody else besides Stafford in that quirky game has hit 230 yards against them. Now, Daniel Jones in week 3, 20 of 37. did throw 196 yards worth of offense. He couldn't get 200, 196%. He ran for 79 yards. Remember, I mentioned earlier, the design runs are part of what they do. Now, Daniel Jones, 341 yards against Detroit last week. Woo! But that's the Detroit, right? That's why we're attacking him with Josh Allen, right? But he's been less than 200 yards in his other two recent games. So I think Daniel Jones gets a few more passing yards than he got in that first matchup. I think he hits 205. That's where I have him at. I think he runs for 55, not the 79 from week 3. I do think he gets some running because he is very good at it, and he gets about 55. And we'll hope for one touchdown. That's what we're going to say. We're going to hope for one touchdown out of him. All right, now, in terms of the running back. So Saquon Barkley against Dallas in week 3. He did score a second half touchdown. He went 14 carries for 81 yards. So that's, not quite 6 yards a carry, but right about there. So he had a solid game. Second half, he had a couple good runs to help him get there, but he also caught 4 passes for 45 yards. So in terms of fantasy, he gets you that 25-point fantasy game, 26, I believe. And so, we can count on that because of that versatility he has. Now, Dallas gives up a high yard per carry to the good running backs. But they often can game script them out. Now, here's what I want to point out, though. Saquon Barkley, teams started game planning differently for the Giants when they realized what they were. They play Seattle. Barkley gets 20 carries. How many yards? 53. Brian, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Julie is like, 2.5 yards a carry, right? And then Detroit last week, 15 carries for 22 yards. Now, of course, he went off against Houston, and we were all over that for DFS. But of course, Houston can't stop anybody, and Houston doesn't have the resources, to really, commit for 4 quarters. They had decent success against Barkley early, but that's my point. Seattle and Detroit are not world-beating run defenses, and they stuffed Barkley. So there's something to be understood here, okay? Now, I think Barkley still gets us to 80 rush yards, and I think he catches 5 for 40 yards with a good chance to score. So I think for fantasy, he comes through for you. So I think you're good with him there, but I don't think you're looking for that big game. Can Saquon Barkley break a 70-yard run? Yes. So if he gets that big run, which we don't predict that, but he could have that big run. But I think 80 yards is a reasonable prediction. And again, that 5 catches for 40 yards, I think we're good. I can't tell you if the touchdown's going to come through the air or on the ground. I think he gets one. I just don't know how that comes. So I don't know if that matters for you. If you're in fantasy, it shouldn't matter. Touchdown's a touchdown, right? Now, the Dallas versus receivers. So look, we know Cooper Kupp shredded them. I explained earlier why Christian Watson shredded them. Dallas has the personnel back. That mistake won't happen, right? And they're the only 2 receivers, Kupp and Watson, that have more than 75 yards against the Dallas defense. Now, when they played in week 3, Sterling Shepard was still in the mix, and he had 5 for 49, Richie James 4 for 36. So again, there was not much receiving production going on here. Barkley pretty much had the yardage that they had as a running back. So now Darius Slayton, though, he's the guy because he wasn't playing in that game, right? He's had between 66 and 86 yards in the last 3 games. So Darius Slayton has been a very, very strong asset. I won't talk long about him, but when he came out the first year and he played well, maybe it's like 800 yards ish, and I was all in on him for that next year, and then he just fell off the face of the earth. I just think somehow the New York staff got disenchanted with him because I didn't see it. I mean, he'd have an occasional drop, but I always felt like he was a good player. He could get open. He understood the nuance of getting deep and being able to, shield the body and make the big catch on occasion. And I thought he was strong. But, you never know who else besides Slayton's getting used. So I think we could reasonably project that Darius Slayton is going to put up 65 yards here. I'm not going with more than that. I'm going with a lower end game. We got Trevon Diggs. We got Anthony Brown. We got the pass rush coming. He's the only guy Dallas really has to look out for. You're not worried about Richie James, Marcus Johnson, David Sills, all the other guys they just roll out there. Again, no Wan'Dale Robinson. So I don't think Slayton has a big game here. Again, we always say this. Can he get a big play over the top and surprise him? Yes. We can't predict that to happen. It's unlikely it happens. It's possible. So we say 65 yards. That's where we're at for Darius Slayton. Now, Dallas against the tight ends, no tight end has hit 60 yards, and only Cole Kmet has scored on them. And basically, they're down to Tanner Hudson, Lawrence Cager, the practice squad guy who's had a couple catches each week, and they brought him up. But I really can't reasonably expect any production out of the tight ends. Could there be a short touchdown? Yes. Could there be 25 yards out of one of them? Yes. Even though Cager's been getting the job done, I think Tanner Hudson, if you were like in a super deep Thanksgiving draft or whatever, I think you got to consider that. But that's the only way. I mean, you're not starting these guys. You have no confidence in them, right? All right, let's go to the Dallas Cowboys on offense. So, like we said earlier, the Giants are below average against the run. 'em. Now, their schedule has been one that, I mean, it's been tough. I mean, they've lost 3 straight. They've lost 2 of them. 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 They've lost 2 they haven't been able to take advantage of the Giants' run defense because on paper, I mean, you look at their run defense, okay, their numbers are good. They don't give up. They're bad. They are a bad run defense. And in pass coverage, they're bottom 2. And their pressure rate, bottom 11 per Pro Football Focus, of course. Now, Dallas goes into this game. My guess is they go in with a balanced attack. I think they want to be a little more run dominant. They want to throw off play action when they can, but I think they can go in very, very balanced and be comfortable with that on their home field. And look, we can't ever predict this stuff, right? But how do you put Tony Pollard? How do you put the genie back in the bottle, right? Now, Zeke Elliott, here's what's going to work for Pollard. I think Pollard does get another large workload here because Zeke was obviously eased back last week. It's a short week. It's a Thursday night game. So, Zeke's probably going to get another low snap share. Zeke played 29% of the snaps last week. He had 15 carries and he scored twice, which is beautiful. So if again, you might see similar for Zeke. You might see the 15 carries. You might see the red zone work. So I think for fantasy, he's okay. I don't know how much upside there is because I really think they're going to limit his touchdown this short week. But Pollard played 54% of the snaps last week. He killed it as a receiver and as a runner. He's been so dynamic, and Dallas, the coaching staff is excited about featuring ways to get him the ball. And so I do think Pollard gets the edge here. And on the passing game overall, I think Dallas uses play action with great success. They may not have a lot of pass volume here, but a lot could do with the weapons they have. Ultimately, if they get a decent lead, I think they may not end up being overly aggressive at the pass. Again, if that lead is in the second quarter, it gets in a double-digit range, I think we could see a lot more running from Dallas. There could even be Malik Davis thrown in there if they get a big enough lead. All right, let's go to the Dallas individual players here. So New York against quarterbacks. Now, they hold almost every quarterback they face under 225 yards, but in the last 4, we had Davis Mills at 319. Trevor Lawrence at 310. Now, between them, they threw just one total touchdown, but they did get yardage. Now, it was garbage time. These were games that the Giants were able to lead. And so, Davis Mills got all of his, literally, fourth quarter. He probably got 200 yards in the fourth quarter. So, that was an anomaly, right? Now, the Giants, despite holding so many quarterbacks under 220, they have not faced an elite passing attack. And back in week 3 when they played Dallas, it was Cooper Rush who threw for 215 yards against them. Now, Dak Prescott has thrown for at least 250 yards and at least 2 touchdowns in all 3 of the games since returning from injury. But I don't think he hits that here. I think Dallas is going to get out to a lead here. I think they're not going to have to put the game on his shoulders. I think the running game is going to get it done. I'm putting Dak at 240 yards and only 1 touchdown. I think the rushing attack gets the job done on the ground. So I'm going to go 1 touchdown there. Now, the run defense, we said earlier, it's a bad run defense. Nobody's had an eye-popping game against these Giants, but 6 different running backs between 82 and 119 yards. They did give 4 rushing touchdowns to the Lions last week. Jamal Williams, yes, and Swift got 1 too. But all year they've given up 8. So that was half of their rushing touchdowns was in that one game. Now back in week 3, Pollard 13 carries, $105 on the ground. Zeke 15 for 73 and a touchdown. So it was very, very easy for Dallas to take advantage of. And that was in a game where there was no Dak Prescott, and so the defense clearly wasn't scared of the passing game, right? So now Pollard has rushed for at least 80 yards in his last 3. He has 6 touchdowns in the last 3 games. 2 of those games, Zeke was obviously out, right? Now, we mentioned earlier, Zeke played 29% of the snaps, had 15 carries last week. That short week does worry me. They could limit his workload, especially if they get a big lead and the game gets out of hand. I don't think they want to compromise Zeke in that scenario, so he would need to get it done sooner. But I think there could be enough. Right now, I have Zeke listed as 55 yards and a touchdown. There is downside there. Because again, if he doesn't get those yards early and let's say they get a 20-point lead, they may not, but if they do, it could be Malik Davis late. Pollard, get his touches, but they could decide, to get Malik Davis involved. So you got to understand. Now, Pollard, I'm putting him on 95 rush yards and 20 receiving yards. This is an easy matchup, and Pollard's going to have his opportunity at explosive plays here, and he gets in the end zone once. I think both running backs score in this game. Let's get to the Dallas receivers now. The Giants haven't allowed a single 100-yard receiver, and they allowed just 6 touchdowns all year. Now, here's the caveat. CeeDee Lamb plays him in week 3 with Cooper Rush. He goes 8 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. And remember, if you watch that game on that Monday night, there was that long touchdown pass that was wide open at the end of the first half, and then he dropped. It was like literally right in his hands, and he dropped it. So that would have been the 100-yard receiver. And I don't know, he may not have had 2 touchdowns because that second touchdown he scored was because Dallas had to score late. But anyway, he would have gone definitely over 100 yards. All right. So now here's the deal with the Giants defense, right? Slot receivers kill them. Christian Kirk was one that really did damage against him, but it's when I look at like all back through the season, the slot guys kill them. Now there is vulnerability on the outside because we mentioned earlier there are injuries here. Adoree Jackson's out, Aaron Robinson has been on the IR, so they will be vulnerable there. Now CD Lamb plays 60% slot, but he gains an even bigger advantage with the outside corners out here. So this is a great opportunity for him. Now that said, I mentioned earlier, I don't know how much we're going to see Dak Prescott throw the ball. So I am now, first of all, in his last 3 games, Michael Gallup is between 35 and 49 yards. I'm putting him on 40 in this game. I think he has a couple mid-range passes. He's able to, again, the no cornerback competition here. And I think Noah Brown gets a catch or 2 as the game starts to soften up. He gets 35 yards. CD Lamb, 6 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown. Again, because of the low volume I anticipate they'll need. I don't think he goes off here. Now, recent tight ends have done well against the Giants. Mark Andrews, obviously the stud, goes for 106 yards, but Evan Ingram, 4 for 67. Jordan Akins had a busted long play, but he 3 catches, 72 yards. Dalton Schultz, he gets between 5 and 8 targets. It's pretty much every week. And his yardage between 54 to 74. So look, he's going to fall in that range, but on the lower end of it again, because again, I don't think Dallas throws a ton. 6 catches, 55 yards, solid PPR play. You play him in your fantasy league. Of course, he has a chance to score a touchdown. Certainly does. If one of those running backs don't score in close, it could be Schultz catching that one, right? So overall, let's predict this game out for you. So basically right now, I know the Giants have a great record and they've played a wonderful season and they've been very fun to watch. But right now, these are 2 different classes of team. The Giants have those defensive injuries. That's really problematic. Dallas is equipped to dominate this game, especially when the Giants have to pass. Giants have been able to get the most out of their offense, but like I said recently, teams have started to take Saquon Barkley away in the running game, and that's really put the onus on Daniel Jones, and I don't think it belongs there. I think Dallas comes out of this one fine. They come out winning 27-16. Now, the line as of right now on DraftKings is Dallas 9.5. So I have them winning this one by 11. Not comfortable, but I do have them covering. And the over and under is 45.5. And I have this going 2.5 points under on this. So I do lean the under on it. If I wasn't comfortable with that, I would consider taking the Giants team total under because there's a chance that Dallas could squash them out a little further. But you always worry about garbage time a little bit. But overall, that's the route I'm going to go here. All right, last of the 3 games. And I see MSA putting up a lot of props. I probably cover everyone you have because I'm going to talk about every prominent player here. So we should be in good shape here. All right. So Patriots at the Vikings, the night game. Hopefully everybody is recovered from the turkey eating and the beverage consumption and all the dessert eating for the time to watch this one. Somewhat compelling game. The Vikings they have a negative point differential, but they've only lost a couple games. So that's kind of funny, right? Dallas lays on the 40-3. I guess that happens, right? But that is kind of interesting. So anyway, injuries in this game. New England center David Andrews is doubtful. Minnesota's left tackle Christian Darrisaw is out. That's big. He has been playing at an elite level this year. Cam Dantzler, one of the better cornerbacks, he's on the injured reserve. He missed last week as well, but he is out as well. So let's look at this game now. Let's start with the Patriots and offense. How do they scheme this one up? So it's a bad time for them to run into elite run defense because that's what they want to do on this short week. This is a game that they would like to control on the ground. Now, New England's been decent at run blocking. It doesn't help with David Andrews out. That does hurt them. He's listed as doubtful. I should say that, clarify it. But I mean, doubtful, you're out, right? And so that said, now Minnesota is lights out against the run. And they are probably matching up very favorably against the Patriots here. And, I think that the New England offensive line could be in trouble if Minnesota forces them to be pass heavy. If they get a big enough lead at some point, the pressure, that's the other thing. Minnesota can get to the passer. Za'Darius Smith's been excellent, and Danielle Hunter's been in an ancillary role, but he's obviously who he is. And Delvin Tomlinson, he's been questionable, but we're not sure if he's playing. If he plays, that really helps because he adds a pressure piece to that puzzle. But anyway, that's it's a team that pressures. Like I said earlier, Cam Dantzler being out doesn't help Minnesota. So here's how I think New England shapes up. Look, Bill Belichick knows this is an elite run defense. He is probably not going to beat his head against the wall early, and he's probably not going to let them just say, "Yup, we're going to be in 2nd and 10, we're going to be in 3rd and 9." I don't think he could do that. I think with Dantzler being out, I think with the coverage for Minnesota not being great. Now, their coverage per Pro Football Focus, they're number 22nd in pass coverage, and that's when Dantzler is included in the lineup. So I think this is a situation we can take advantage of here. Now, remember I said earlier, the Vikings have pressure. Their pressure rate is 8th. They're very good. But on early downs, here's what you want to do. You want to, tip the run game. You want to play action. You want to catch them when they're in running type downs so they're not pinning their ears back early. And I think we use some play action here. Now, I see that Devontae Parker, and I know I laugh. I get it. Devontae Parker, right? But he's questionable. To my knowledge, he's supposed to play. We'll have to wait and see what that shaped up as the day goes on. But he could be pivotal here. We know he could hit 3 zeros, and then he can bounce up with a 150-yard game. He is the type of player on play action who could win against the secondary down the perimeter. And Mac Jones can make those throws, especially, again, off play action. So I think that's going to be a big focus of New England coming in here to take. Now, the receivers aren't great at separating, but like I said, against this cornerback group right now, I do think it gives them a bit of an edge. And I think Jacoby Myers over the middle, obviously, is always a strong play. He's very reliable for Jones. And the plays when they're not taking downfield shots on play action, Myers is going to be a big part of mitigating some of that pressure. They're going to want to get the ball out, and he is the best option for that. So let's talk about the projections now. Quarterback. Sorry, guys, got to itch my nose. All right. So Minnesota has given up 6 different quarterbacks 275 yards, and they've given up multiple touchdown passes to quarterbacks in 4 of their last 5. Now, early in the season, in their first 5 games, it was 1 or fewer, but lately they've given up more pass production. The injuries have settled in, right? That's the problem. Mac Jones now, he has a total of 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games, so not much, and he's less than 200 yards in 2 of his last 3 games. He had a 246 against the Jets. That was in that game that kind of got sneaky shootout late when Zach Wilson threw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and 2 back-breaking picks. Now, last week it was different when Wilson threw for 77 yards, but we digress. So I do think Mac Jones is going to have some success in the passing game. I think there's going to be those play-action shots I talked about. Now, it's not a big game. I think he throws for 240 yards. And I think he's able to get one in the end zone. I think he's able to, get us that 1 touchdown. That's probably about all we're going to get. It's not going to be a high volume game, but he'll have a fair floor. All right. Now, the running backs. Minnesota hasn't allowed a running back over 87 yards. Now, there are 3 different running backs who had 2 touchdown games against them. Jamal Williams, Devin Singletary, Zeke, so we've seen that happen before. And Pollard scored twice against them. Now, some of it was through the air. Dallas had two touchdown running backs against them last week. Anyway, those in the last 2 weeks, they really getting Singletary was 2 weeks ago. So this is very recent. They've been getting kind of hit there. Of course, with Singletary, you're playing the pass, so he had opportunity. So Ramondre Stevenson was like 4 yards per carry most weeks. And then last week, he kind of ran into a rough matchup at 15 carries for 26 yards. That wasn't wrong. Now, his targeting has been great. He's getting like 6 to 8 targets for the last month. Now, Damian Harris came back last week. He had an 8 carry for 65-yard game. He looked very good. And he's getting targets too, just not nearly as many as Stevenson. He caught 2 for 28. My projection on this game, I think Ramondre Stevenson does not have a good matchup. We talked about how lights out the Minnesota run defense is, but they're going to try to run Stevenson enough. And if there's a lead later in the game, he might be able to breathe in a few yards that way. I'm going to put Stevenson at 55 yards on the ground, and I'm going to put him at 30 receiving yards. And I think he gets you 3 to 4 catches to get there. So now one of these running backs has a chance to score, but I'm only putting 1 touchdown for the Patriots in this game. So there's a chance one of them scores, but I'm not going to push that out there. I'm going to say Stevenson's like 85 total yards, and Damian Harris will have some success. Again, very bad matchup. I'm putting him at 45 rush yards here. The Minnesota receivers. So the New England receivers. Minnesota's given up multiple 90-yard games for receivers in 3 of their last 5 games. Now, Jacoby Myers, 42 to 60 yards in his last 3 games. His target 6, 6, and 12. So there's high floor, some ceiling, but no other New England Patriots receiver has hit 20 yards in any of their last 3 games. This is not a great passing attack, right? I think Jacoby Myers, though, finds a way to get 65 yards. I think Devontae Parker has the game, though. Like I said earlier, I think, again, he has to be active, right? So pay attention to that. But I do think with play action and the Dantzler being out, I think that Parker's going to get a couple long catches. I think he can get you 80 yards, and he'll score the only touchdown here. That's my thought. Now, if he doesn't score, it'll be Hunter Henry who does. But I'm gonna go with Devontae Parker as my big Thanksgiving surprise DFS slate breaker and things like that at no cost. Tight ends. Now, Minnesota has given up 40 yards or more to 4 different tight ends, and only Dallas Goedert's gone over 70. And they've given up 4 touchdowns all year, including 2 to Mike Gesicki. Now, Jonnu Smith, the targets have been great the last 3 weeks. He has 4, 4, and 4. But his yardage, 10, 21, and 40. Hunter Henry has 1 target, and 4, but he has a higher floor than Smith. He had 20 to 50 yards a game. So it's funny. Henry's getting like half the work, but he's putting up similar production. Both of them are dart throw tight end options. Either of them could score. Henry, if Parker doesn't score, Henry has a chance to score, I think. And so Henry would be the one I would play if I was doing a DFS thing. Even though Smith is getting more targets, I think Henry is more likely to be available in the red zone. Finally, let's talk about the Vikings on offense now. So New England, below average run defense. I know the numbers look good. They have hardly played anybody. So I think Minnesota comes in, and I think they want to run a balanced offensive attack. Not much different than usual, right? And now the guard play has not been overly good for the Vikings, and it does hurt that their left tackle Christian Darrisaw is out. He has been phenomenal. So I think game plan wise, I think that they are going to come in and they're going to use a quicker passing game, use the screen game, use Dalvin Cook as a runner, but also screen to him, get some passes out quickly. I think they want to just mitigate that offensive line. And now if they're going to do it on earlier downs, and they're good early in the game at doing this, they early in the game might stretch the field a bit more. They might use some play action. And if the game stays close throughout, they might be able to get away with that later too. So I think in terms of this, Justin Jefferson had a really slow game last week. Well, I'll break these players down individually, but I do think it's a comebacker. Bill Belichick, we know he's going to try to take away what you do best, but it doesn't always work. Justin Jefferson can win no matter what you do against him. And coming off the bad week, I think the coaches are going to want to just get him reintegrated heavily into the attack. And I don't think that Bill Belichick has the ability to stop Jefferson. I think that Jefferson has so many ways he can win, and I think they're going to scheme him up to get the ball. And Adam Thielen is getting volume, but he hasn't had much production. Hawkinson's getting 9 to 10 targets a game. And of course, we always have the narrative. Kirk Cousins in a high-profile game. The narrative is that he doesn't show up for those. I'll talk about it, but when I watched last Sunday's game, I had to think. All right, let's go over the individual players here. So New England against quarterbacks. Now, Zach Wilson, not the 77-yard game last week, but again, a few weeks ago, he's the only quarterback to go over 270 yards. That was a very weird game that went off the rails. But like I said, he has 77 in the rematch. But again, other than Tua Tagovailoa in week 1, when the Miami offense was not really ready for prime time, the Patriots have not really played strong quarterbacks. Now, Kirk Cousins, there's no consistency in his yards from game to game. And touchdowns, 2, a 1, a 0. So we don't even know what we're getting there. His pass attempts all over the board. We got a 40, a 53, a 23. Never know what you're getting. I do think there's attackable matchups here. I think Justin Jefferson's going to be fine. I do think Kirk Cousins comes up with a 235-yard game, and I think he throws for 2 touchdowns. Aaron Jones is the only running back to go for more than 62 yards against the Patriots. That is amazing. The only touchdown against them, David Montgomery. But again, you look at the schedule, ridiculously easy schedule of running backs. Sometimes with the Patriots, this happens, right? They have these easy schedules, and we look at their numbers, they're dominant. They really aren't as dominant as they look. Now, Dalvin Cook, his rush attempts haven't been great. We have a 17 of 14 and 11 in the last 3. His rushing yards, all over the board. We got a 47, a 72 against Dallas because he got game scripted out. He had 119 in there. Now, in week 9 and 10 together, he had 11 targets. So he will be using the pass game. I think in this game, he's going to rush for 90. He's going to add a few catches, and he's going to put up 30 yards in the air as well with a really strong chance of scoring here. So I put him on for a total of 115 yards, but again, 90 rush, 30 through the air, and a touchdown. Receivers. So the only receivers to go over 95 yards against New England are Garrett Wilson in the first matchup, didn't do anything in the second, and Alan Lazard. And the New England defense only given up 4 touchdowns to receivers all year. Now, again, other than Tyreek Hill in week 1, and that offense was far from figured out, it's been a pretty easy schedule for them. So remember, I mentioned earlier, Justin Jefferson had 3 catches for 33 yards on 5 targets last week, but recently he's had a pair of 115-yard games. Now, Adam Thielen usually gets 7 and 9 targets a game. Last week, the blowout loss, we throw that game out. They pulled starters in the second half, no problem. Jefferson is going over 100 yards here. I'm putting him on 120 yards here. But I think the player that's going to now, I think that Belichick could do something to Jefferson in the red zone. I do see that happening. I think your contrarian DFS play is Adam Thielen. I think he gets low yardage. I think he gets like 4 catches for 30 yards. I think 2 of them are touchdowns. I think he's going to get in the end zone twice. And I know they haven't been there like they've been in the past, but he is so reliable in the red zone. And I think this is the game where he's going to have the open look. I think the attention on Jefferson is going to open it up for Thielen. I know I'm crazy, but that's where I'm going with this one. And then tight ends. So the only productive tight ends against New England and Tyler Conklin, Mark Andrews, and David Njoku. And they've given up 5 touchdowns for week 4. But only Conklin has scored since he had a 2-touchdown game. That wasn't this past week when he didn't score. It was a couple weeks ago. Hockenson has had 9 to 10 targets each of his 3 games with the Vikings. I put him on 55 yards. I put him on 4 catches in this game. So I think Hockenson has a decent game for you. Again, it's very, very doable for fantasy. Now, overall, moderate scoring game. I think both teams have some conservative elements. I do think that New England's going to have to use play action to be successful. And the way to change that is if Minnesota gets out to an early lead. I think this game is fairly close throughout. I put the final score being Vikings 24, Patriots 16. Now, the line on this is 2.5 Minnesota. So I have them. This is the only game I have with a fairly comfortable margin of victory. Over and under, and this is 42.5, and I'm projecting a 40-point game. So I'm 2.5 points below on that one. So that's how I break these games down. Look, if you've hung with me, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. If you hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube, I would be very, very grateful for that. If you want to check all that we have out at RotoWire, including my Thanksgiving Day article, I wrote a cheat sheet for the whole Thanksgiving games of Slate. I broke down, I gave you pie rankings, side dish rankings, beer rankings. It's fun. But if you want to get a free peek at those and you're not a RotoWire subscriber, go to rotowire.com/try. No credit card, no scam, no gimmick, just an email. I'll just get you 2 days behind a paywall. I think that'd be awesome. All right, let's see if you have any questions here. All right. So, MSA, happy Thanksgiving to you. And I see that you have a bunch of, I should have probably answered all of these receptions. The only thing I probably did was receptions. Diggs, 7.5. That's tight. I'm still going to say more. And that the receptions part's tight. Gallup he's going to be 3 or 4 catches. I'm going to say less on him. I'm going to say 3 catches, but it's going to be 3 or 4 catches. Avila, Swift, Sutton, or Pacheco. So half PPR, that helps you with Pacheco because Pacheco doesn't get targets. He doesn't get red zone work. Last week he was like 82 and like 100 and something yards. So it's like 8 and 10 points in your half PPR. Swift isn't playing enough, right? He had a touchdown last week. He's playing 31% of the snaps, and it's not really a good matchup for him because Buffalo isn't getting much in the receiving game, the running backs. So I'm going to say Sutton is probably your play here. Does Pacheco have a higher floor than Sutton? I think in half PPR, no. I think Sutton's going to catch 4 or 5 passes here, and that's going to put him at least where Pacheco's at. And if Sutton has a better chance of scoring than Pacheco. So I'm going to go with Sutton in that situation. That's why. Brian, thank you so much. And Jefferson on the receptions, I'm going to say over on that. And I went over the yards for everybody already. Eli H, full PPR, Justin Jefferson or Christian Kirk. You know, and I love Christian Kirk, but you know what? Justin Jefferson, I'm not worried about Bill Belichick here. I don't think they're going to have an answer for him. And I think if he wasn't coming off the bad game, Justin Jefferson, I think there might be room for him, but I think they're going to make sure they get him back on track. And Thielen, I think I had him at 4 receptions, so I think that's going to be just a tad. This is very close. Jeff Johnson, you traded Geno and Schultz for Lamar. Was that a good move? Lamar has is 1 or fewer touchdowns like every game since week 3. His rushing has been like a 40 to 50 yards a game. So honestly, Geno has probably had slightly more fantasy production, and I don't know that that's changing. There just are no weapons for Lamar. So I think you're hoping that Lamar comes up with a big stretch run where they turn him loose on the ground and he has a couple big running games. But based on what we've seen this season and the lack of weapons he has, and with losing Rashad Bateman was huge for them. He was like their one-on-one winner on the outside, and they don't have that now. So I'm concerned, but where's hope for you? There's hope that Lamar tunes it up as a runner. Loney X, Keenan Allen or Jeff Wilson. Yeah, Jeff Wilson, they're playing Houston. I have Jeff Wilson as a top 5 running back this week. He's going to get 25 touches probably. He's probably going to sail over 100 yards at a score. Keenan Allen, of course, he's going to get his receptions, right? We like that. I think Jeff Wilson, though, he is high floor, high ceiling. Jeff Wilson can score 2 or 3 touchdowns here. They're playing Houston. So I'm going to go with Jeff Wilson here. Both are great plays. I just think that Keenan Allen is more of your floor play. I don't think he has the ceiling that Wilson has here. But, of course, Keenan Allen's going to get 7-8 targets, and he'll be fine there. Randy, you're welcome, man. Appreciate you. Thank you. Brian, am I going to give out advice for the Thursday games? So I tried to cover that all. Oh, so you mean like lineup questions. With the holiday, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because I got a lot of family obligations. I can answer your questions here. Let me just answer these for you, and it'll be good. Because, I'm probably going to be a ghost on Twitter once I get off work today, and I probably won't get back on until Friday night, maybe. I might get on Friday night. But hopefully my going over each player on this slate helped you with the Thursday decision. So Stevenson or ETN? Yeah, ETN does not have a good matchup this week. Let me just look back on this for a minute as I'm going back to this. And I really have focused on these Thursday games heavily right now. So Jacksonville, I'm a little concerned about them here. They are an underdog here. And, the Ravens, adding Roquan Smith was a big deal for them because Patrick Queen was not good in an interior thumper role, but that solved a lot of it. They don't get ETN involved in the pass game much. But yet Stevenson, I already kind of went over my scenario. It's a death matchup, but Stevenson's going to catch more passes than ETN. So I think that Stevenson has a higher floor than ETN, and I don't think there's a ceiling game for ETN. So if you have a gut feel, go with it because they're both excellent players. They both could break a big play and flip the script. But I think if we're playing this game 10 times, I think Stevenson has the better floor. I think they both have similar ceilings. So I'm going to go with Stevenson. And then Sutton or Burks. So with Sutton right now, I have to say that, they still have injuries at wide receiver. So they're going to have to get Sutton targets. And that helps them. They're playing Carolina. And Carolina lost their top corner to an Achilles injury 2 weeks ago. And that really helps him on the outside. So and Burks, the whole thing with Burks is, remember he had that 50-yard touch or catch late in that game. The game was over. Green Bay thought they were going to run the ball into the line, so they weren't playing pass defense. And I know they had somebody back there, but it was like an easy 50-yard game. But even back to early in the season, Burks was not a big producer. So I think that's going to be a work in progress. I think ultimately we know the Titans are playing the Bengals. They want to run the ball. They want to keep it conservative. And we could get something, right? But ultimately, I think that Sutton is a stronger play because I think he has a higher floor than Burks, and I think they have comparable ceilings. And Brian, all right, man. All right, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thanks for hanging with me. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and we will talk soon.